Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from another garden in Accra. This one is in an area called Cantonment. It housed a lot of embassies and still does. It houses the president. His home is here. So it's one of those neighborhoods that has a lot of history. And we're sitting in a place called Bistro 22, it's a half-in bistro, I will say that much. So if you're in Accra, you're looking for a cool spot to hang out in, this is a place to come. So I'm just gonna do, again, this is not an ad. I just like to give thanks for the spaces that facilitate our conversations. And I am so excited about this conversation that we're about to have today. I think I mentioned in a recent episode, last November, there was a convening called Forge, and it was facilitated by an organization by a local citizen, Mekmeed Kamara, and it was focused on reparations and looking at the different policy makers and artists coming together to think about reparations. And yesterday was African Union Day. And over the weekend, I had a full-on Pan-African experience. It was lovely. I gave a talk at something called Afro Talks. You'll hear more about that. And then I went to a screening, and the screening was for a film called Omitted. And I have with me the filmmaker, and we are going to talk about what that's all about. So let me get to her bio, and then we'll take it from there. Having graduated from London's School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, and inspired by her learning and experience in New Zealand, she founded the Black Curriculum in 2019 at the age of just 22. As a student, she expressed her activism as the working class student officer, and also co-founding the Art and the African Mind Society, which aimed to promote and provide African-centered art and information as well as support for students. Continuing to engage in her love for writing, she published her dissertation, winning the inaugural Walter Rodney Prize. Ooh, that's quite an accolade. Walter Rodney, if you don't know who he is, we will definitely have a link to him in the show notes. And that, dovetails with all this. He was a great Pan-African, we'll say that. And she also has written on social and cultural themes throughout the African diaspora for outlets including The Guardian, A Black Ballad, Quartz Africa, and others. Believing in the power of education, social impact, and youth social entrepreneurship, her work has been recognized globally from Vogue, GQ, to the Historic Freedom of the City of London Award in 2014. Snaps. Expanding her entrepreneurship journey last year, that's 2014, she founded the Racial Impact Collective, an initiative supporting social entrepreneurs and seeking equity in the grant-making world. Lavinya Stennett, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Nice to be here with you.
Welcome to Accra.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope you're enjoying your time and seeing not just the work side, but some of the other sides. I hope you do with that.
It's all about it.
So let's jump right in. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
Hey, so where I'm from, I am from a place called Jamaica.
Jamaica.
It's
one of my favorite places.
Really? Oh my gosh, I'm happy to hear it because my family were born there, my dad and my mom's parents. Mm-hmm. And I call it my place, like where I'm from, because I think it's the reference point for my world and how I see things and how I move and who I connect with and how I connect with them. And I think I understand the world through the lens of someone that was born from Caribbean parents. Even though I wasn't born physically there, I was born in the UK. I don't think the UK is my place of home. So, yes. So the next question is where my local?
Where are you local? Yes.
Where am I local? Ooh.
But before you move on, where in Jamaica?
So my family initially are from Portland.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But we moved down to St. Thomas.
Okay.
So all East side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And where are you local?
Where am I local? I am local to wherever there's water.
Oh, so you're a mover and shaker.
I love the water.
Okay. But you are based in
the UK for now.
UK. Okay.
I was living in Barbados,
Oh, okay.
but now I'm back in the UK for a bit.
Okay.
And I'll see where I'm off to next.
Okay. So where in Barbados?
I was in Christchurch.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so
that's the
literally-
capital, right?
It's the capital.
Yeah.
So right next to Oystons where the fish is fried and
Yeah,
there's-
I've heard so much wonderful stories about Barbados.
Barbados is not only beautiful, but it has such a strong history.
Yeah.
And you feel that when you're there. So
Yeah. I got to get there. So
absolutely.
yeah, nice. Okay, so you are a roaming local in the UK,
Yeah.
which is fine. And so tell us, what is your craft?
What is my craft? That's a great question. I like to piece together arts, creativity, history, education, and infuse it into something. People say that's edutainment. People say that's activism.
Yeah.
I just call it being a human, you know?
Yeah.
And I think for me, like my craft comes together well when I'm with young people and telling a story that needs to be told, that hasn't been told. Yeah. So I don't know. It's like an infusion of truth-telling in creative ways.
That's it.
Yeah.
I love it. Truth-telling in creative
Creative ways,
ways.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because when you said storyteller, I'm like, yes, but truth-telling in creative ways, that's a craft.
It is.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so how did you come to now where you are in terms of being an entrepreneur and putting this truth-telling into practice?
Into that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you mentioned it earlier when I
Yes.
started at uni.
Yes.
That's where everything kind of like grew for me. But I almost kind of see it as like an incubator period, like things were in gestation whilst I was at uni. Sorry, just before I was in uni, because I went through life outside, kind of like around different communities, seeing different systems work, maybe fail, and have a very kind of like visceral understanding of that, but not have the language to understand what was actually happening. And as soon as I got to uni, I started to then kind of,
Pieces came together.
yes, I could define things.
Sure.
And then when you define things, you get to communicate that to other people and then you bring people in. So I think probably uni was a place that I found language. And then those ideas and those feelings that I had were able to kind of be brought to life. So Art and African Mind, which was the society that I co-founded with my ex, we put together a space for Black students who didn't have a place on the curriculum, would be gaslighted when they would bring up issues in the university that are very real. So we wanted them to feel like healing and peace. And initially it was supposed to be like, you know, like a very meditative and like restorative space, but it actually was the opposite because that's not what the students wanted.
So what did they want?
They wanted justice. They wanted
Got
to
it.
do like campaigns and we did that with them. And it was such a great experience. Like we brought so much change with that role. And as I guess the biggest thing that happened out of our mobilizing together, we created the university's first ever position, a parent position of a Black student officer who would basically then advocate for Black students. So there is currently people who are employed in that role because of the work that we did in terms of campaigning and policy making.
That's
whilst we
awesome.
were there. So
Yeah.
it was a blessing. And I would say from that kind of gave me the grounding to want to take that kind of learning outside of uni and start to think about how we can bring change to schools.
Right.
And then that's kind of gone on its own trajectory. But I've had to learn other skills of like how to raise money, how to story tell, and how to be confident, literally, in
All of
talking
that.
to people.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that organizing, right? Because when we're young and we kind of click with people around us, it's much easier to bring people together, right? And so you had captive audiences. And so how do you think now, as you grow in your work and taking that experience, what were the keys to being able to effectively organize for this activism?
Yes. So I think first and foremostly, we always had a very clear understanding that organizing is about bringing people together. And as much as we want to get the change. And maybe we as like individual leaders, we know what we want to achieve. It's about listening. So we always had that kind of like space of, guys, like, let's just talk. And it wasn't like a formal thing, like, oh, give, like a survey, like you sit here, I sit here, like tell me the issues, we write it down. That is important. But literally we just gave people the space to vent. And I think ultimately, like, if you're going to get to the base of like organizing and mobilizing people, you need to be clear on what the actual issue is. And to do that, you need people to be honest and feel safe with you in that community. So yeah, our mobilizing looked like parties. It looked like having parties. It looked like just chilling after lectures, organizing spaces outside of university as well for us to just connect. So I think just having the space to just be normal with each other.
To figure out how to just be with each other, so then you could then.
This is why we love the word comrade, because it's like, it signifies like we're more than just like politically minded. We have a shared vision, but it's like, we're also, there's a friendship in there. There's a trust and a friendship in there. So yeah, we were able to mobilize effectively doing that. But then also I would say that we had like the ability to translate a lot of the things that would come out of discussions into actual practical things. Because sometimes things get lost.
Organized. So then you're organized, right.
Because things get lost sometimes,
Yeah.
And because sometimes with racism, you're dealing with such a broad scope of things. You have to sometimes narrow it down to say, look, let's just focus on this one thing. And maybe that one thing, we need to translate it into just a short campaign that's going to happen over 3 days. And this is the goal that we want to achieve. Or if it's going to be a set of emails, who are we targeting with that? So there was a result that always was very practical.
Yeah.
And was driven not always with consensus, but with like what we felt would be most effective to get the change that we actually desired. And ultimately, people would then buy in as well. So I would say like having a vision and having the ability to actually just kind of just connect with people are the two kind of key things. There are other things, of course.
Right. Those are a good place to start. It has me thinking about, I firmly believe that democracy is dead. It is in crisis. And so when you said not necessarily consensus, I think that spoke well to the idea that we can move things without having this idea of everybody has a word and saying, but we understand that we have committed to these outcomes. So if we are organized enough, the people who are kind of have the capacity are organized enough to move to that, then that's where we start. But it started with, we all know that this is what we want. In between, there might be changes and iterations, but at the end of the day, those who have the capacity, because that's the other thing. It's like, not everybody has the skill set, capacity, drive, discipline to move it. So I think that is a riff on maybe not democracy, but community governing is a different word. Is what we are looking for. So another conversation for another time, but that just has me thinking. So that started it. How did you end up in New Zealand?
Interestingly, I had a lecturer in my African studies class who was white, and she was a lovely lady, very quiet. I just felt that she just had a depth. I can't explain it. Like, she would sometimes just pick up certain things in class and comment on it, but she wouldn't go in. So to have a conversation with her, you needed to then take time away from that lecture to sit down with her. And one day she said to me, just come to my office. And I was like, oh, like one-on-one, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you know what I mean? And it's like that kind of like lecturer-student dynamic. I wasn't prepared for it, but I went in to her office and she had like a picture of her son and her family. And it was just like a very calm atmosphere. And she was like, look, I just want to get to know you. And she just started opening up to me about herself, which was interesting because usually lecturers are all about the knowledge that one has or furthering the academic studies. It was very personal. And then she was like, I think you should apply to this opportunity that I've seen. It came through to me. It's called Dream New. So she sent me the email. And then I looked at it, went home. I wrote out my plan of how I wanted to do the application. So it was a video submission for a scholarship for any university in New Zealand that you could go to for 1 semester. And then I said to myself, let me go next door, ask my neighbor who was from New Zealand what I should write on my application. And he sat down for like 2 hours with me and he was like, you need to talk about this, talk about the Treaty of Waitangi, talk about that, talk about that. And I was like, okay, that's cute. And he was like, oh, there's a song that you should know. And what's the name of the song? I sang a song anyway for the application in Maori.
Yeah. And
then I applied and that's how I ended up getting the scholarship and going to New Zealand for a semester.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Talk about using your resources.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so happened that you had a neighbor who was from New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, this is the university I'm going to.
Wow.
Yes. And so I studied Maori land law, kapahaka, and Maori indigenous studies.
And that was for a semester?
For a semester.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And that was
amazing.
life-changing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what would you say was the pivot? Because you kind of mentioned this at the screening. What was that point that then you knew what was next for you?
The point at which I knew what was next.
So from that experience, because you mentioned in the screening that going there and understanding how Indigenous peoples understood how to get to where they wanted to be in their rights, it was rooted in their self-knowledge. And so how did discovering that let you know that the Black curriculum was the story for you?
I felt like I knew it when I was in the classes and my lecturers would be talking about the genealogy of this grandma being a freedom fighter for the land that we're now going to go see next week. And then there'd be experiences where they would be so open, they would cry. And I was like, wait, but like this experience of literal land theft and eco-genocide and all these things that they're experiencing have strong similarities to the destinations, or not destinations, the original places that we've come from as Black people in the UK. I saw parallels with Jamaica. I saw parallels with South Africa. I saw parallels with, other countries on the African continent. I was like, but we don't have a timeline that's able to place us in these incidents of British colonialism that have interrupted the process of just us being. And I was like, oh, I should do a timeline. And I told my ex and he was like, I think you can think much bigger than that, a timeline, no. So I was like, okay. And I went away, I thought about curriculum. And I remember writing down the Black curriculum, like, gonna have a curriculum for young people to know everything. So it wasn't even about knowing African history per se, it was more at the time to get people to understand the impact of migration and British colonialism and how this all fits together. Like, how did we arrive here? And I think what really inspired me is that Maoris have their own court systems. They have their own system. So I was like, that whole for us, by us movement,
so much more meaningful. Yeah.
And like, it's not to say it's perfect and things get done quicker, but at least like there's an ownership of the culture and a recognition in the land that we don't have in the UK. So I said the Black curriculum is needed to really embed and entrench our presence and our history because we built this country. So,
right.
Yeah.
So you go to New Zealand, it's during your studies. And so this is where I'm going to ask you why the where. So you said you're kind of local in many places, but how did you come to be living and working and playing where you currently are? And maybe you can think of this in the context of how maybe your family ended up in the UK, if that helps. But
yeah, that's a good question. How did I end up? So I would probably start with the fact that I didn't really grow up in a traditional family system. So when I think about even my grandma, she migrated from Jamaica to London in the Windrush period. So like between 1947 to about 1960s, there was like just a period of Black people coming to the UK for work because they invited people. Just want to put that out there, right? So she came, had my mum there in the UK. My mum went back to Jamaica to connect with her roots, met my dad. So there was always that like movement through the waters.
Yeah.
And my dad's family, they're scattered across the Caribbean and North America as well. So how I landed, I think I've always been exposed to the fact that like there is that there's family everywhere on that side. And I've always seen the Caribbean as home. I've always seen it as a home. Took our first trip when I was like 9 back to the Caribbean. And I said, look, like, I just, you just go back home and
you feel it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even if you're young, you know who you are.
Yes.
So after that, I kind of didn't really grow up with my mum and my dad. So I was moving a lot. So I've always, at least in my adolescent years, I've moved from this one, this to this one, this one to this one. So for me, I don't really get attached to places. I'm not special. I can leave and I'm happy with new experiences, which is a good and bad thing. I think that's kind of followed me in my later life where I love to travel. And I decided after a period of burnout working for my company that I need to reset. Like I can't work at this pace and speed and think that it's sustainable. I'm going to reset my nervous system. And I went back to Caribbean.
Okay.
So I didn't go home to Jamaica. I had a middle ground. Actually, no, I did go to Jamaica for a while. But then I found out about Barbados.
Yeah.
They have a visa.
Yes.
The welcome stamp that allows you to come in, you know, and work remotely. And I was like, perfect. So then that's how I ended up staying there for a year. And yeah.
Okay. Interesting you say burnout because it's real. And you started early.
Ooh.
You went basically from university to being an entrepreneur, so straight into that. So tell us about how you became a businesswoman and then how you recognized the signs of when you needed to either expand, contract, or do what you needed to do to maintain a business and maintain your own sanity.
Yeah, I think I'm still learning. I just want to put that out there. Like, this is a journey. And I didn't know a thing about business when I came in. Like, I knew how to make an impact. I know how to get people's attention. I know how to create policy change. But in terms of actually financing the business, employing staff, finding the right legal, you know, I didn't know that. But I've always had the yearning to want to know more. So I was very fortunate to get a grant very early on in the journey of around 10,000 after I put in a grant application. And then what came with that was legal support and financial support. And I put together a advisory board of people who have experience, lawyers, finance. Not many, there was about 3.
Yeah.
But they guided me. And I think with that, it's helped me to kind of see things that I like naturally wouldn't be able to see because I don't have the experience. And even having them, I've made mistakes where I didn't listen to my intuition. And I didn't think that my intuition was a good business guide. I thought that I needed to have an MBA. I thought that I needed 10 years of experience. I thought that I needed like a managing director to tell me the answers when sometimes I actually just knew. And the instances that I didn't listen, things went wrong. And so I'm learning now to coming back to that burnout and resetting is to just go back and being still and actually just following that guide because I'm a person of faith and I believe that everything is predestined. And if you're distracted and you're in the noise, you can't listen to what the Holy Spirit's saying to you. You can't listen to that direction. And so I'm learning now that because everything has been predestined and preset, I need to be still to follow what needs to happen and also be open to having people guide me. But I wasn't doing that. I was following like a Silicon Valley model, superficially or artificially getting a big team because that's what I thought I needed. Kind of just doing every interview that came into my inbox. I had no system of why.
Sure.
And I've learned that the why is so important now. Like that's the biggest thing that I always come back to.
And that's what started it, right? You had a why.
Because you get caught up. And I think also as the business grows, more demand comes, but you have to be able to be clear about the impact that you want to make because yes, you can make money, but if that money isn't coming back to the original goal and the vision of the mission, then it doesn't make any sense. So I've learned now that the vision and the mission of the organization is paramount above everything else. Like even if it looks good. So for example, like the period after the resurgence of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter after the murder of George Floyd, 2020 to 2022, there was a huge demand for our services for teacher training. Teacher training was at the heart of our service. So it's almost like, I don't know what you guys would call it in America, like
What do you call them, UK?
Teacher training is kind of like racial EDI,
Oh, the
DEI
DI.
training.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I personally, that's not what we started out doing.
Sure.
What we started out doing was contacting the young people, building with them, creating curriculum resources like creativity, young people, like dynamism. And I think we started to go into a direction where we were listening to what white people wanted us to do rather than us setting the agenda, because ultimately we know they don't. So yeah, I had, after that period where I came back, we reset everything and got back to square one and that vision. I think, it's coming back to what you know, it's coming back to the vision and the community.
Right. All right. I love that. So coming back, you are focused more on the youth and those types of interactions. So I'm curious about now what your team looks like around the curriculum. So how did you now gather the people who are necessary and implementers with the business?
I'm in love with my team. I'm in love with everything that they do, because it's, again, full of that creativity and like even though some of my team, they're students, like they're literally in their last year studying exams, dissertations, and like the amount of wisdom and dedication that they possess and give to the mission, it's just like, wow. Honestly, you have to look back and think, like, who are these young people? So at the moment, our team is comprised of, it's a small core team. They're mainly students. One of them have actually been with us for about 4 years. She actually left in between for a period, went to teach, become a qualified teacher, came back because she realized the impact that she could have in the school system was limited.
Yep.
But with us, you can do anything.
Yeah.
You know, prisons, schools, you know? So the core team is that. And then we have contractors that go into the schools to teach young people. And that's about 12 people. And then we have young champions. And our young champions are like the best cohort ever. So young champions basically are the legacy piece of TBC. And ultimately, they share the mission of the Black curriculum. They're ages 16 to 24. They are the youth. They know what's up. They're experiencing it in uni. So they shape campaigns for us. They create content. They travel. They came to New York with us last year. They just inspire. They deliver workshops, but like ultimately they're the heart of the organization.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have other programs too, but the Young Champions is the piece that was created just after we kind of reset.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just taken off really. So how we find them, conferences, schools, and we go into the schools, and just young people who put themselves forward, you know, like some of them will just email, say, look, I'm just looking for an internship. I'm like, great, I know exactly what program you need to be on. And it's nice when they actually come to you.
Right, exactly.
Rather than you're like, oh, I've got this opportunity and they don't want to come.
Sure.
So yeah, we just, I think, authentically try to live in the mission, and then young people come to that.
So let's talk about how you have defined yourself as not only a social entrepreneur, but thinking creatively in all of your ways. So you won an award for writing your dissertation. You mentioned at the screening that you wrote a book. Tell us about that book and how it became Omitted.
Okay, I have to be careful what I say. So Omitted essentially is now an oral and a visual piece. It wasn't that before. It was the vision of a publisher who had reacted to George Floyd and wanted me to write something for white audiences on what they don't know about Black history. And I was like, okay, yeah, it could be cool. You know, I was really excited. Of course, it was my first opportunity to kind of put something out into the world that had my name on it, even though I had written a dissertation, but a book is a book, you know?
Yes. With a publisher. So you can self-publish, but with a publishing house, there's a difference.
But I soon realized that I had a different vision. And I think that the stories that I want to tell can't be boxed into white sensibilities. And the stories are also live right now. They're not historical. So anything that we're referring to in the past has a present day effect. And for me, that's where the reparatory piece is so important. So I had a chapter there that spoke about reparatory justice, its origins, the movements, and the impacts today. And so when I pulled out of the deal, because I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
So you can fill in the blanks of
Right.
what's happened there.
Yes.
I was like, this needs to be a piece. Because I spoke to my cousin in Jamaica. She's like, my girl, when I write about, but I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read it. She's like, I don't like to read. I don't like reading. So you need to create a film.
Okay.
And I was like, you're smart.
Yes.
So then I was like, yeah, Omitted needs to be a visual piece. Because I was just thinking, like, if this is something that my people are going to want and enjoy, not to say none of us like to pick up books, because that's not true, but there's an element of this connecting to all audiences and it being something that is like accessible and digestible and you can feel it. So yeah, I turned Omitted into a piece by working with an amazing company called Transmission. And the heart of Transmission is to transmission is to transmit stories, right?
Yes.
So I think that's the goal of their company. And yeah, through that partnership, we created Omitted Part 1, I should say. Because
I love it. I was hoping because it seemed, it's a short film.
Yes.
And so tell us through a synopsis of what the film is.
So Omitted is essentially a short doc that explores the theme of reparatory justice, but looking at the educational piece that's missing around curriculum and essentially how curriculum can inform what needs to be pushed in terms of the reparatory piece. So re-education and the retelling of narratives. So we've captured thought leaders, students, academics, also myself in the film as a way to kind of spark conversation on reparatory justice but from a curriculum lens. So
yeah. What do you see as the part 2 of the story?
Oh, so many things.
Yeah.
We're literally gonna have a meeting about this after.
Yeah.
Because how I really want this to work now is that there's a piece in every place you could think of, every sector. Because as much as this is not just students that have the information and access to books to talk about reparations or the MPs or the academics. It's about people on the ground. What does reparations look like for the everyday person? Because if people are not pushing this, if people are not involved in it, what will happen is that reparations is a thing for governments. It's a language that is never relatable to the everyday person. Yeah. So Omitted has to be for the people.
Right.
So I see it as it's a unifier of different sectors, and like you'll start to see the themes that connect to all.
Exactly. Ultimately. So the title, as you described, is Omitted because it addresses what has been omitted in our learning, right? And so the first thing that came to my mind is, as I was thinking about, okay, how does this live? How do we actually start to focus reparations, which people have been estranged from? There's been so much controversy. Oh, reparations, different. But again, this is the AU's charge for the year is reparative justice, right? And so one of your subjects, the gentleman who looked at the records and found out that his family was a part of the slave trade. And so on the very basic strength of it, there are records of most companies, families, individuals who benefited economically from the trade. So I don't see any reason why, when we say it's a government thing, there's no reason why there would not or could not be a policy that identifies those people and gives them the tax. That's it. So then where we divorce the idea of, the government then managing it for us, because where we have a problem is that governments manage our education system, and that's why we get the education system that we have. Where we then place the funds is in the Reparative Justice Fund that then funds programs like yours and programs in communities that are about us. So that was just what came to mind. And this. And so with that in mind, I want to ask you, the thinking broadly in the space that you're working in, what would you say is your glocal speak? So this is a word, a phrase, or a saying that's a meaningful part of your local experience, or local experiences that you've had. And why or how do you come to value it as glocal speak?
Okay, so my phrase is a patois phrase, and it's quite a popular one. So if you're Jamaican or around Jamaicans, you will know it. So we say "likabot with talawa."
Ah, yeah.
So "likabot with talawa" basically refers to the idea of being small but mighty,
Yes.
or small but great, or small but powerful. And I think that it really just depicts me.
Yeah.
And like the work we do.
Uh-huh.
Because you look at the Black curriculum, people often assume, like I've had people come up to me being like, "You're the founder? Like, you're so young," or like, "I thought it was like a 50-year-old woman." Like they expect me to have experience and be, pompous and whatever. And you look at the output of the Black curriculum, we are a small team, and we have always been that way. We are not a conglomerate.
Yeah.
We do not have multinational offices. Like we are a very small team.
Yeah.
But the output is great and the impact is great. And I think that like really not only obviously it derives from Jamaica and like who we are as a people and a nation. Like you look at the cultural influence of Jamaica, insane.
Mm-hmm.
We are a small country in the Caribbean with global influence, not only from music to food to like just the influence around politics. The whole idea of reparations started from the Rastafari.
Right. Exactly.
So
yeah.
I can't divorce that from my identity. And I think it really just really encompasses the beauty and the breadth of this work, and comes back down to the necessity to pay homage to humble beginnings and humble packages, but great outcomes. And I think that's even for me it's a big learning for me constantly with the business. Like I don't need a shiny business. I need an effective business.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So speaking of that, we talk about business on this podcast. And so let us understand a little bit more about the business model around the film and around because you're a social enterprise, but you're not an NGO, which is very different. So tell us the distinctions and how the business and the film will then be commercialized.
Yes,
we got to make some money, I guess.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for that. So that curriculum from very early on, I knew that we needed to make money.
Yeah.
I just knew. So I was presented with two options. In the UK, we have this thing called CIC, which means Community Interest Company. And you have two options within that. One is to become a CIC for-profit.
Yep.
And a CIC that makes no profit. With the CIC that makes profit, there's a thing called an asset lock, which ultimately means if you make profit, you can only, as directors, take up to 35% of that profit. The remaining has to be reinvested back into the company. So even though we're for profit, like I'm not stuffing it in my pocket to buy a Ferrari, like it's going back into the community and the initiatives that we do. But ultimately, it gives us the freedom to apply to grants. It gives us the freedom to have sponsorships, which we have with like Spotify, Vogue, and like apply for grant foundations, like Mission 44, Marks and Spencer, which are like our partners. So it gives us the flexibility to have a number of revenue streams without HMRC or any kind of regulator looking into our finances and being like, okay, what's going on there? Because you know how that happens. So yeah, I think it allows us to grow the mission. And ultimately, this is a very important thing that I've realized through this journey, is that this work, people do not respect it because they see charity, like they see anything that is to do with like humanitarian things. It's like, first of all, there's two attitudes that I've seen. The first is that we're begging and we're charity cases. And so therefore there's like a power imbalance of, well, we're going to basically own you and fund you because we're allowing you to do this work. And secondly, I think there is just a lack of interest in this. So people often assume that, they're all right, they just get on with it, type vibe, they're just doing charity work. But charity work needs investment for it to work, because we're correcting the things that governments have failed to do.
Exactly, yeah.
So I'm learning now that the business model is more than just us making money, it's about value. And that value is seen in things like creating huge base of intellectual property in our, products, our resources. So we make sure that everything contractually is ours. It doesn't belong to anyone else. And I think that's important in terms of ownership for Black people, Black owners, owners in the diaspora on the continent need to own the stuff.
Yeah.
Because this is the value that we create, especially in the culture. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
People, they want it. And we saw that when they came in after the murder of George Floyd. Everybody wanted a piece of the puzzle. So it tells me there's value there. And I think, the model that we've chosen allows us to own that.
Yes. So it's an IP is your major revenue model.
Absolutely. So us creating content, doing films. So we could work in partnership with cinemas and charge people to come, and we would get the half of the box office price or profit. We can also go to Netflix or video companies and say streaming and just say, look, here we've got this 6-series thing, let's negotiate something. So there's different avenues we could do with it. And then also, if we're thinking about impact, there's something that we could easily just put into schools. Like this is something that could be a part of the curriculum. Because, if you have tech in your school, that is, of course, this is something that teachers can use as a discussion prompt. So it's a bit of both.
Yes. Interesting. Yeah. So you mentioned schools, and you're here in Ghana, and you just had a school day today.
We did, yeah.
So tell us about that. Tell us about your live experience of being in a school.
Yes. Okay, well, first, I just want to give homage to Isaac Kojo, who gave us access to the school in Teshi. He is the CEO of Peace First, an organization based in the US, who have done work with Downsview International School. So we today, Raquel, Convicta, Jane, and I ran a workshop on the power of reading to get the students to really take reading as seriously as they do other things, because the value of reading has multiple impacts, not only in the school, but also outside. And so, it was just an amazing immersive workshop. The students had questions. We went into the importance of reading so that they can understand their history and why understanding that history has an important role to play in their career choices as well, in the everyday. And, we're speaking to students that are as young as 9 and as old as maybe 15. So they're about to do their exams next month. And so, it's just to ensure that they see themselves not only as, I wouldn't say competitors, but in a world where, other students have the privilege of having private tutors, or they have the privilege of being able to access multiple resources. For these students in Teshi, it was so crucial for us to really instill that you can be in this dorm and you can go to this university. But in order to get there, you have to put in the work.
That part. Yeah.
And so it was really great. The staff loved it. The staff were very welcoming. And the headmaster, Sam, really thanked us for the work that we did today.
Yeah, yeah. I think a big part, especially for children in Ghana, is just getting the attention. It goes to this idea of having a loving, empathetic presence, which is often missing in the school environment, because we come from what the colonial system had left us, which is a very strict, disciplined place, and which often doesn't celebrate these out-of-the-box types of experiences. It also does not recognize the poverty that is implicit in our economic structures. And so to that extent, it's beautiful to have these external stakeholders like us, to come and be a part of the storytelling and the empowering of young people.
We did give back as well. So we donated to the school, gave books, Black curriculum resources, bubbles, like things that they would just like to just use.
Yeah.
And so that is also a big piece of it as well. Like the practicality of like how they can feel comfort whilst doing an exam. Like if you're a girl and you're on your period and you don't have proper sanitary.
Right.
Do you understand?
Right. Exactly.
So I think
again, going back to that, the economics of what we're deciding we're ignoring in a lot of cases about our society and culture. Yeah. Yeah. Well, kudos.
God is great. Thank
you.
Yes,
indeed. So with that in mind, I'm thinking about a mindset hack. So how do you hack your mindset?
Okay. So very recently, I think after the period of burnout, I had to really check my mind and like really sit with what I'm thinking and how I arrive at conclusions. And I remember God gave me this framework. It was very simple. It was refrain and reframe. Okay. Refrain and reframe. And what I think what that means to me is that sometimes I can have the tendency to look at the negative faster or think about what could go wrong. And that's where the refrain comes in, because if I'm a person of faith and I proclaim to have all this hope for a future and I'm following a vision, then surely I should have that mindset of I can do all things. I can do it. And the things that might go wrong is just there to help me learn. So the refrain is to challenge those negative thought patterns, and the reframing is to reframe into positivity, or to reframe into something that is realistic. Because sometimes your thoughts, they are not realistic. Like, you could be living a great life, but in your mind, you're just like, this is bad, or, and your thoughts aren't always real. So for me, I've had to take that framework and just speak it over and over to remind myself, whenever I'm in a situation, refrain and reframe, refrain and reframe. And it comes in so handy, because then I'm just like, oh, okay, I see it differently now. I'm in the same exact position.
That is
but
it.
I see it differently.
Yeah. I think it's a good, quick check.
Yes.
Right? Like, we can say flip the switch, right? But refrain and reframe, it's like, wait, reframe. Like, you just take that breath and then use the two words, and then it moves you. Yeah. Okay. That's a good tips, guys. We have great mindset hacks that we share on the podcast. So thank you for that. So let's talk about what's new and next. So what's next for the Black curriculum? What are you thinking? What's going on?
I'm thinking global awards for young people who are making change in the area of like Black history.
I love it.
Me too. I'm like, I want to see them. I want to know who they are, and I want to celebrate you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking loads more videos of films, because just seeing like what happened on Saturday was so special. I'm like, we could do this more often. You know what I mean? Bringing people together. And obviously we're hoping that the work that we do will influence the national curriculum in the UK. But that we don't want to end there. So I see the Black curriculum being on the continent. Right. I see Black curriculum in the Caribbean, long term, and ultimately working to make sure that all young people, Black, white, Asian, Filipino, whoever you are, you have an understanding of the contribution and the value and the humanity of Black people. I think once that recognition is there, like, we're good. So education. It's not going to stop.
Right. I'm going to challenge you here to think outside of the box a little bit in terms of when you think about the continent, because you mentioned you hope to get it into the UK curriculum, but we know those curriculums are broken. So here on the continent, how might you imagine the Black curriculum being adopted widely?
I can see it so clearly. Because when I was listening to the girl that spoke on Saturday, who spoke so eloquently about the way in which the history curriculum in Ghana just did not really focus on the important aspects of Ghanaians, like not only national history, but also like the community's history, the history of the Ewe, the Ga, etc. I was like, we could be narrating with Ghanaians the history that we know has happened, the present day reality of the things that people know, but they don't really talk about every day. But the Black curriculum can exist as a portal for those histories to be communicated. Absolutely. And then the education piece around the training of teachers. That I think that is the most crucial element, because obviously schools aren't going anywhere for now. Or the school structures that we have, they need to be infused with a challenge. And I think there isn't that piece. It's like, oh, you've done your training, go and teach.
Right.
But there's no criticality or top up of that training. It's almost like you're just left to just do your thing and bring in your own bias. But is it healthy for the children? And if the children contest that teaching, the children are problematized. So we want to help the teachers as much as the students. And I think there's a service there around the education of the trainers.
Sure. And I'm going to challenge you because I think about this often. My background and what I came here to do is in education. And so I've worked in schools and seen where the professional development, it comes, but it comes from the aid community for the most part, right? So that was the aid community. So we had a project that was funded by aid. We created a curriculum for teachers to implement local language, math, and science. And one thing broke it, which was that they geopolitically decided who their partner was going to be. And it wasn't us, the actual practitioners. It was an organization that was just geopolitically made sense. And so that broke the program. And so that has me understanding that, and I'll give you this knowledge, and we are going to partner because
Amen.
this is, yes, because I don't believe that the current institution is the right partner, but their captive audience is. So teachers somehow being able to make this available to teachers to be better for themselves, right? So that's a private sector saying we want better teachers, we want better students because we want better workers. That's the end of the story game. So it's an outside of school facilities, just local centers where we're building the knowledge indigenously. So say we're in the Ewe village, there's so much knowledge to be collected amongst those people. Just like you're saying, like, how do you tell the story? You're gathering it and you're having the right practitioners collect it and curate it so that it then becomes part of this broader curriculum. And then pulling in teachers to then include that in there with everything else in their toolkit. But this place is a center for everyone to come and be there.
Nice.
So that's my thinking, just being on the ground and how Africa works, because the colonial system has taken our institution.
Yes.
And when I talk about that fund is what then supports these other centers, because part of what we've locked ourselves on is this regulatory body that is making education what has always been for them and not for us. So let's talk. I love your new and next. I wanted to hear you saying you're coming to the continent, coming to the Caribbean, because it has.
No, and you said it's broken. That's what you said in the UK.
Yes.
It's broken.
Yes. 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 So this has been so awesome.
Thank you.
Yes. So we always like to talk more about not just the work, but what happens with you outside of work. So
That's a good question.
I asked, what you do in your leisure time? Are you a reader? Are you a watcher? Are you a listener? And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens? Or what else do you do?
Good question. I think I'm a bit of both, like a listener and a watcher.
Okay.
I love people watching.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
I love the beach. I just love water. I told you before, I love water. So just going for just walks and just taking in the atmosphere. But also I love reading. And recently I'm getting into more audio.
Yep.
So I'm reading 2 books currently. Can't remember the name of the book that I'm listening to, but it's really interesting. It's about this lady. It's an autobiography. She's basically lived in a communist Algeria. And she's writing from the perspective of herself as a young girl and just kind of looking at the contradictions between the change in society from communism to something that is more kind of capitalist, and like the fracture, how that on a micro level kind of creates fractures in her family and religious beliefs and things like that. So it's a really interesting, quirky story.
Okay. We're going to get that from you to put in the show notes. So yes.
It's really good. And then I am reading this book called Material World by Ed Conway.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a white man that is kind of reckoning with this idea of the things that he has and we see are not as linear as we see it. So a car is not a car. We know that. But where has the rubber and the tires come from, and what process has the earth had to gone through in order to produce this on a mass level? So I think he's finally kind of like reckoning with that.
Right.
And
That's the climate reparations conversation.
It's deep. So he's gone into salt. He's gone into the things that are not fossil fuels, which is dominating the conversation right now. But these things equally,
Basics.
but they equally have they're being sought after in quantities, and it's destroying the earth. So salt, copper, zinc, all these things that you wouldn't think are necessary, but completely are.
A part of the story. Yeah. They are what industrialists use to create the information age. So
There you go.
I love it. Those are good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait for the story about the memoir. So we'll have that in the
Yes.
show notes, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Lavinia, it's so
Thank
nice that we were
you.
able to do this. Yes. So before we go, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Last thoughts. Yes. If you're coming to Ghana, please try and come outside of December. Don't add to the extraction. Try and find a way to come and see Ghana, give to Ghana outside of December.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, like now.
Enjoy the peace.
Enjoy the peace, right? And come and do something, right? Like we all have something we can do to contribute. And, truth be told, there's a lot to do. So
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you
Thank you.
for that. All right, Glocal citizens, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, bye for now.